Hi, I'm here with Will O'Donnell, a CIO of ACRE. Welcome, Will.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to have you here. Can you tell us a little about yourself, and then we'll get into our topic for the day, okay?
Yeah, sure. As you know, Will O'Donnell, CIO for the ACRE operating group. It's covering all aspects of IT, both on the ACRE international side, which is EMEA, but also on the American business as well, which is North America. So ACRE Americas. So holistic responsibility for IT for the group. I'm in the company now coming up to 2 years. Previous to that, I was in the grocery retail sector operating with a company called Lidl, a German discount retailer. Spent 13 and a half years covering all aspects of IT in terms of both hands-on way back when in my days as an engineer and computer technician back in the old days. But yeah, from a leadership perspective, spent time covering everything from IT infrastructure through to application management, and spent time also abroad in the Slovenian business as well for Lidl as their CIO. So I spent let's say the majority of my career before the security sector in grocery retail, which was interesting in itself. Very fast paced, very aggressive, and very competitive. Very different to the security industry that I find myself in now. That's kind of a little bit about me.
Okay, terrific. So, coming from groceries, I wonder, we're going to talk today about security issues in transportations and logistics. Mm-hmm. Do you feel that your background in the grocery supermarket field has helped you understand what's happening in transportation and logistics? It seems like there's a lot of logistics in that business.
Yeah, logistics and transport would be mission critical to anyone like a grocery retailer. Yeah, I think they live and die by getting products to their store locations in simple terms. And of course, in modern times, that's no mean feat. But a lot of technology supported processes being really, really important to those operations running really smoothly, because it's quite complex these days when you have, let's say, large product ranges, large reach in terms of regional locations, a lot of systems in place to make sure product is sourced and delivered to warehousing locations and then on to store locations, et cetera, et cetera. So from an IT perspective and definitely from a security perspective, I think there's a lot of connections there in that respect.
So what is your perspective on this, the state of security in transportation and logistics right now?
I think it's improving. However, I think there's a little bit of a sort of a slow adoption to the risks that exist today in the industry. I would say if you look at the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years in terms of cybersecurity and the risks associated with that, I think we've seen a massive shift in the threat level, and it's affecting every industry. I think there's some industries that are maybe more aware than others. Maybe the more technology-driven industries that will be more tech-savvy probably have a head start on the majority of other industries. But if you look at, let's say, really operational industries like transport and logistics, although, let's say, the large companies will be, let's say, technically educated and technically mature, a lot of the small to mid-sized companies may not be. And that's where the weaknesses tend to be, and they tend to be then an obvious target for cyber criminality from that respect. But I think times are changing. I think your average Joe, let's say, is becoming a lot more security aware, both from a personal perspective, but also from a professional perspective as well. And we start to see now that mindset and education seep into those kind of industries that you mentioned.
What do you think are the major threats and risks at this point?
Major threats for me is people, and that's the risk factor I mentioned to Kayla last week as well. It's not really about anymore how much technical prevention you can put in place to protect your company. It's really what you do with the people inside your company to make sure that they're ready to protect the company, because that's generally the weak point these days. It's more than likely today you'll see cyber criminals targeting people rather than the technical way into a company, and they'll do that in many different ways. To take phishing as an example, really easy to do, and it doesn't take a whole lot for somebody to sort of fall onto a hook. And it can be something as simple as looking for, somebody to confirm an email or a password to an account of some sort, or it can be much more complex, where criminals are building profiles of companies over long periods of time. So once they find a way in and they have a communication channel in place, they start to then in the background, almost like in a sleeping sort of dark corner of a room over a number of weeks or months, build up profiles of companies and learn more and more about how companies operate, how to communicate, what's important to them, where there might be financial weaknesses or financial targets in terms of opportunities, and then we'll strike once or more than once, multiple times over a course of time. And it tends to be not a technical weaknesses in terms of protection against these threats. It's generally the weak point is through the people. And I think that's the big change in the last couple of years now, is where it's really now important to make sure that your internal employee is really aware of the risks that are posed today, because it's ever changing. And that's the challenge right now. It's an evolving world that we live in from a cyber threat perspective, and it's getting more and more difficult to make sure that we are protected. And I think a lot of that is down to making sure that the employee is aware. And I use the word aware because some companies may try to educate their employees on all the latest trends, and that's almost next to impossible, because by the time you finish doing that, there's a new trend, and it's the information or the education that you've just completed with the employees is more or less outdated. So it's more the awareness piece, to second guess and second question situations, whether it's email or a telephone call or simple things like that may occur on a day-to-day basis. It's to be aware of the potential risk and to second guess and then look for validation. That's where the focus should be. And that has a big effect. I think if you can get that employee thinking twice before they act, that's generally 90% of the problem solved in a lot of cases.
So what are, in your view, what are the attackers trying to accomplish? Are they after money, or they want to disrupt things? What are their goals?
Many goals. So historically, you think of a cyber attack, generally speaking, think about it's for financial benefit or financial gain, and that still exists for sure, and it's still a big part of that criminal underworld. So the ransomware piece, of course, is a big piece, but more and more today you see let's say criminals looking for information, because information is becoming more and more valuable. Yeah, and it may be information that they want to sell on in one hit on the dark web, for example. And again, of course, the more sensitive the information, the more valuable it is. And you look at information that may reside in financial institutions like banks or government bodies. That's quite valuable information that can be sold quite easily on the dark web. Or they capture information, and as I said before, they build up a profile, and all of a sudden they can actually provide to a potential buyer a whole host of information that can potentially lead to further criminality, of course. So if people are sharing account details or addresses of employees or personal details, that can be sold purely as information for further criminality, or it can be either used by then a second wave of attack in terms of gaining financial gain from that information as a sort of launch point. So it's historically financially based, but more and more you see it's information based.
That's very interesting, and I think people don't appreciate that enough. That these attacks can be feeding information into a broader, criminal ecosystem that then creates its own, follow-on attacks. That like a attack on a freight company could lead to an attack on a bank because they have bank information.
Exactly, and it's one of the reasons why things like GDPR have come around. So the data protection legislation that exists in the EU, that's one of the driving factors why that's really gained traction. And it's if you look at it on paper, it's a really complex set of rules and regulations that, to be honest, a lot of companies find hard to follow or even find it hard to understand. But one of the main driving factors behind the purpose of that concept is to protect not just the person and their personal data, but also if a company is compliant from a GDPR perspective, it means also that the risk of that information being stolen is also less and lower.
So beyond training people to be more aware of these kind of threats, what else do you think companies can do in this industry to mitigate the risks?
Well, technology is always an important factor there as well. I know I say it's becoming less about technology and more about the people part, but of course, technology is a big part to supporting that concept. And I think a lot of times, definitely on the small to mid-sized company level, you look at companies and what they're doing to technically protect their internal assets, and you'll see gaps in a lot of cases where they haven't got the basics in place. So even surprising, let's say, anomalies like no firewalls or no rules to protect their edge network might be in place, particularly those that have on-prem infrastructure. So the small to medium-sized enterprises that haven't gone to cloud yet may not have the capability or the knowledge to protect themselves. So they need a server to do A, B, and C, and they need a couple of PCs to do these things. And all of a sudden, yeah, they're up and running and doing the job on the inside, but also completely exposed to potential attack on the outside. And it's the lack of knowledge, lack of awareness, but also potentially lack of finance and lack of financial backing to actually make sure that there's protection there that's required, technically speaking. That can come from different perspectives. It could be a board of directors that aren't interested in financially backing, let's say, an investment around security and protection because they don't see the value in it, or worse, don't see the risk. Or it could be from the opposite direction, that they just don't have the realization from within the business that it's an important factor in today's world. So it's a lot of things like that can be done. And as days go by, more and more technical solutions are coming around to bring a lot more transparency. So in terms of risk management from a technology perspective, there's a whole suite of applications that exist on the market today and that help bring visualization in terms of what's happening. And things like the modern solutions will visualize not just what comes in, what breaks through the barriers, let's say, but also it'll show you the attempts to break barriers on your edge protection network as well. So it'll show you both. So that itself is a valuable asset to have in your armory from a technical perspective as well. But you see still today, the small to medium enterprises that would be still unawares of that potential risk. And that's why I think things like the cloud and the shift towards cloud for infrastructure as a service or for anything as a service is really beneficial to that market, to take away that headache and that responsibility and hand it over to somebody who delivers that as their bread and butter. Yeah, it's part of the package, which I think that's helpful and useful for companies of that ilk.
Right. I mean, cloud security is definitely challenging, though. Like, I think some companies struggle with the two-tier security model. They may not understand what their responsibilities are. And also, the issue that I've heard a lot about is how, when you get back to people, that people may not understand their own corporate security policies. So they'll do something like deploy a server in the cloud without telling anybody because they don't realize that they're not supposed to do that. And then later someone says, hey, why is that there?
Yeah, but you've always got the flip side to that coin as well. That same person still will have the same level of knowledge of their internal policies and may deploy a server in an office or a PC and connected to a public internet line, and nobody else knows about it, right?
Right. So I think so you get to these sort of automated discovery solutions to help, and but again, I like you said, as smaller organizations are struggling with it.
Yeah.
So does ACRE offer solutions in this category? Tell me about what you all do for this.
So in terms of cloud-based security,
or anything related to mitigating the risks we've been discussing.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of products that jump to mind in the cloud domain, let's say. So we have a product called ACT 365, so ACT 365, which is pretty much a cloud-based access control solution. It's for that small to mid-market size. So you're talking about physical access control of a building, but managed remotely and hosted remotely in the cloud, let's say. And things like that give an awful lot of power and comfort to those small to mid-sized entities that really don't have an understanding of what it is that is required to manage an on-prem solution. But it also gives them a lot more capability as well in terms of what they can actually control and actually see from an access control perspective for their their building. So that's becoming more and more popular. And it's definitely the way those small to mid-sized companies much prefer to go. It's a lot easier to manage. It's much more scalable. It's much more cost effective. The agileness around the maintenance and development of solutions inside that sphere is a lot more swifter from a product development perspective. Things are always connected to the network. So this is where your IoT sort of discussion comes in. And again, by having IoT devices, again, many more opportunities are presented in that direction as well. So there's products like that that we would be quite popular in terms of the sales perspective. And there's a number of different significant companies that we've had maybe some case studies done against in terms of what the benefits look like for them after procuring solutions. So people like Ray Marine, who are a large supplier of technology to the comfort liner ship industry, and companies like Unipart, major logistics and transportation company, all using these cloud solutions for access control with integration to other building management systems. And that's one of the nice things about our product ranges, particularly in the cloud side of things. They're integratable with other ACRE products, but also integratable with other customer solutions, so native solutions that maybe the customer already possesses in terms of building management. And that creates the opportunity then for even the large vendors to create this sort of security ecosystem from one single viewpoint, which is quite nice to have as well, because that brings a lot of transparency and control from that perspective as well, and creates a lot of operational efficiency gains as well. So one example that maybe gives a good indicator of what ACRE 365 can do is take a logistics company. So the goods in, goods out process. You have a lot of truck drivers coming and going, bringing goods to the warehouse or then delivering goods from the warehouse to the destination. There's an awful lot of, so let's say, without technology, a lot of paperwork that is landed in that process. And one of the nice things about ACRE 365 is that you have this remote control feature. So, for example, it can do authorization push commands from the web front end. So you could be anywhere in the world controlling access to one of your major warehouse locations, and those visitors may be strangers. And it's an integration between video recognition and then the physical access control to a door or whatever the case may be. You can control what happens there. And the technology that's used today is really quite nice. It can be something simple like a push PIN notification that the person visiting the door is issued a PIN number to enter, or even more technical savvy aspects like a QR code or a mobile phone solution as well, so they can actually receive it through just a mobile push notification and actually enter via Bluetooth, for example. So all these options are at your fingertips as a customer with something like ACRE 365 in your power. So it's definitely making life a lot easier, not just from an operational perspective, but also from a control and transparency perspective as well around your building security. So there's a lot of case studies there that have been done with some small companies, but also some large companies as well, where they've really had a big gain in terms of value add from purchasing such solutions from us.
All right, well, it sounds great. And I think this idea of a unified view is very compelling, because it gets back again to people. I mean, I think this is not an unknown topic of conversation, but I feel like it's not emphasized enough, which is that, security operations is a human-centric process. Correct. And people they're not the weak link, but they're the missing link a lot of the time. They just can't find enough people. And the more efficiency you can enable for them, the more productivity, the better. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. And I hope we will speak again soon.
No worries. Much appreciated. And thanks for your time also. Nice to speak to you.
Thank you.